Thanks for joining us for part 2 of our conversation with Ed Schrager on the Netflix documentary, The Social Dilemma. In part 1, we rated the film doing our best impressions of movie critics. If you missed that, we hope you go back and take a look. Now, in part 2, we go deeper on a discussion about the film. We talk about what the film got right and what we think it might have gotten wrong. We also talk together about what we thought were the most critical messages of the film that we each took away from it. Again, thanks for joining us. Now to Lamar for the rest of the intro.
Hi, this is Lamar, and you're listening to Getting to Third Space with Lamar and Tom. A third space is a term that refers to a safe space for people to come together for respectful dialogue in a spirit of listening, sharing, and learning. In this podcast, we explore what it means to have third space conversations, and we try to model them. If you like what you hear in this podcast, please be sure to subscribe, share it, and of course, like it. The more people join us, the quicker we get to third space as a society. Now let's get to third space today. What did they get right in the film? What is it that we've talked about that some. What did they get right? What did they get wrong? And chime in with thoughts. But Tom, why don't you start by saying, from your perspective, what did you say? Yeah, that they nailed this. This is what they got right.
Well, I think one of the things they got right was their focus on, or not so much a focus, but alluding to and introducing more this idea that there seems to be not sufficient ethical consideration on the part of, and maybe even moral consideration on the part of the developers of AI and social media, that they somehow in their rush to develop a product, they didn't take time to do the long range scenario planning about, if they did it in this way today, what might that look like in the future? What might be the positives and the negatives? And do they really want to go in that direction? It just seemed to be, let's get out there with something because we're most concerned about beating Facebook or Google or Instagram or whoever, or Twitter, or whoever, to the market with this. I think they did a pretty decent job of really kind of prodding the conscience of the social media companies around, what's your ethical responsibility here? What's your moral responsibility to the people that are using your platforms? And I appreciated it. I'm not so sure in the category of what do they maybe get wrong. They alluded to some responsibility that users have, but in my thinking, maybe it wasn't as balanced as it could have been. That it was more about the responsibility of the social media companies, and yet at the same time, all the users are autonomous people, and they have the ability to make decisions around their use of social media. So those are the two things that come to mind for me.
Okay. Oh. Ed, what were you seeing that the film got right and maybe didn't get so right?
I think the bit about that I didn't see, I don't think, was talking about the positive impact of social media. So I don't remember them talking. Obviously they were talking about the negative stuff. Which is, and I, basically agree with all of that, and that definitely some stuff needs doing, which I think stuff has happened. But in terms of the positive, there are some really good good things about it. And one example of that, I don't know if rugby's probably not a thing that you guys think about over in America quite as much as we do, but there's a woman rugby player called Ilona Maher, who's a massive star. She's American, so she plays for the US Eagles. They were in the sevens in the Olympics, and she's a great rugby player, but also a really great role model. And she's just signed up some deal to come and play for a British club over here for 3 months. And so, my daughter who plays rugby, her favourite player is this Ilona Maher, who's an American, and it's because when she went to the Tokyo Olympics, I think it was, so whenever that was, 2016, 2020, I've forgotten. She got all over TikTok and Instagram promoting her story of getting herself out there as a rugby player, but also she's, and I've only learned this very recently, but she's got a degree in nursing, she's got a master's in business, she is a rugby player, but she's a really positive role model, which is really great. And so, for girls like my daughter who loves rugby, but she doesn't really, I don't think she thinks she's going to be a rugby player, but she's, it's a real positive thing for her to see this story that I think without social media, I don't know how she would have ever come across that sort of inspiration. So I think there is quite a lot of that, and there are some other in that world. There are some other really key players who put their stories out there, and they can really sort of engage with the young fans, which I think is a really key role of sport in the world. Is not just for people who want to be the next big rugby player or the next big footballer or whatever, but to provide people with that positive, you can do it sort of message. So I think that accelerating that message and amplifying that message, that's great. I think she's got something like 8 million TikTok followers, or
wow,
massive, which is great, because the message that she's putting out there is really positive. So I think that bit didn't really come through, and I know that they right. weren't really trying to do that, but there is a lot of really good stuff that comes through the social media, and it's not just that story. There are loads of really good things, and quite often when I'm having conversations with my daughters about stuff, whether it's politics and our lovely elections that we have, and your lovely elections that you have, and all of that sort of thing, and I say, what they come up with something, and I say, where did you find out about that? Oh, I saw it on TikTok. There was some video on TikTok, or someone shared it on YouTube or something like that. So that they get a lot of good stuff through it, as well as the junk. And that didn't really come through in the film, I think. I would be really I'm not quite brave enough, but I'd love to get one of my daughters or somebody of that generation to talk about this kind of thing.
Interesting. Yeah.
Well, that makes a lot of sense too, because it kind of comes down to user beware and take responsibility, and there are lots of things that we have access to that we just didn't have access to, for whether it's people or culture or whatever it might be. That just this conversation we're having today, in fact, is a product, I think, of the positives that you can have with social media. When I think about what they got right, and this is kind of one of these, I think they got it right, but I don't think they got it right all the way kind of things. And that is, it's kind of, is there an addictive quality to our connection to social media? And I think what they got right was being able to influence behavior. And I go back to what you said earlier, Ed, is this has been going on for eons of influencing people's behavior. The whole gambling fallacy that they talked about, the intermittent reinforcement of the person pulling the slot machine. I even have, but I have my personal story with that, where my wife and I went to a casino in Colorado, walked in and found 50 cents sitting in a tray, 2 quarters. So my wife picked them up and played them, pulled it once, and she got $50. We walked out and had dinner. That was it. That had to do with how we chose to interact with that whole process, right? But there is this reinforcement, I think, of certain kinds of behavior that could be classified as kind of a behavioral addiction. They did some presenting of maybe there's also a biological component to that, maybe the dopamine high that you get, or the hit that you get. But there's a lot of things that are behavioral as well as maybe physiological. But, gambling, pornography, we can go down the line, shopping, drinking alcohol, smoking, etc. We could say a lot of that has a strong behavioral component, but also at some levels, at high levels, you begin to get maybe a dopamine hit that reinforces that behavior. So I think they got that right, but I don't know if I would put all of that emphasis on the social media. I did see that, I liked what they said when they said, predicting behavior takes a lot of data. I think that's something that the general person doesn't necessarily think about. But to be able to use the algorithms in a way that actually is meaningful, which is probably why Tom and I's little experiment didn't go very far, is it takes a lot of data to do predictive behavior and to adjust to be able to interact with someone who's interacting with the algorithms. That's just my theory. I don't have data necessarily that supports that. But that's kind of my theory. You mentioned, Ed, kind of the elections that we've been having here, but also around the world. I do think, because people tend to these days just turn to social media for their information about things political. I think that there is this clear connection with polarization.
Yeah.
And I don't know how much the algorithms drive that and how much I drive my own by where I go get my information and where I choose. And that's something Tom and I have talked a lot about. But I think that is there. I think they got that right. What I think they got wrong was there was a statement that they made saying these services are killing people and causing people to kill themselves. I think that deserves a lot more scrutiny to come out and say it the way that they said it. So I think this is one of those that went a bit too far in my book without having more conversation about it or more information about it. I don't know if I had to put that in the video the way that they put that in. You remember the data that was shared by the social psychologists about the young girls' self-harm in connection with a time where social media became more prevalent.
Yeah.
And he was making a connection, a correlation, and the correlation is obvious just by looking at the data. And I'm not saying that there isn't a connection, but I think all of us who've taken basic statistics understand the difference between correlation and causal connection. And I would like, before I would put data like that out there in this way, I think I would have liked to seen better information that's making the connection between the data. What is it about social media specifically that we can document, that we have seen and been able to put our finger on, that is related to, and he did a little bit of that with, kind of the someone who is maybe being body shamed. But I don't think that went far enough to be able to make the connections they were making. I don't necessarily disagree with it. I just don't think. I think they missed the way they presented that. So that's kind of where I was at on what they got right and maybe what they could have done better.
Well, I know we also kind of looked around and to see what other responses there were to the film, and you two guys may have done much more of that than I did, to be honest. But I'm wondering what other insights or comments or thoughts did you find from others that were reacting to the film, both negative and positive?
So for me, in these days of AI, one of the first things I usually do is ask AI. So that's my sort of I don't know what you call it, like a critical friend or getting a second opinion or that sort of thing. So I'd really recommend doing that. So jump on your favorite AI and just ask it some questions. So I asked it about one was can you give me a synopsis of the key points of the documentary? So it came up trumps with that. That was good. But then, so I said, can you give me something like a cynical take on the documentary? And the points it came up with, I thought were really good, and we've kind of covered some of these already. So it said it's overly simplistic, self-serving narratives, fear-mongering, limited solutions, profit from critique, and hypocrisy in tone. So it came up with some quite good stuff, which sort of gave different views. So as well as then watching the Dr. Todd, if I've got his name wrong, apologies, but I thought his review of it was quite good. But getting AI to give me a bit of a cynical take on it, and then I sort of went round and round with AI as well, just asking it more questions and going deeper with it, which is a key thing to do with it. And I sort of got into, and over here in our news we've had the story, I don't know if you've heard, but in Australia they're now going to ban social media for under 16s. So
yes,
I think it's not coming in immediately, it's coming in a year or something like that. So I was like, what would happen if we banned it? So I went round and round with AI asking, what would happen if we banned social media, or do you think it's a good idea, and what can we learn from history about banning things, and overall, as I kind of imagined what maybe I thought might come out was banning this kind of thing is not a good idea. So if we're moving into sort of solutions, and I always do go fairly rapidly into what are we going to do about this sort of stuff, going anywhere near banning social media for kids, I think is going to be a really, really bad idea. So if that's where this documentary is sort of leading the people who are making it, or people in the society as a whole, I think banning stuff would be a really bad outcome. For me, it's got to be about education and empowering people to use their brains and do that sort of level of critical thinking and take control of ourselves, so that it is a tool that we use and we can put it down, like they were saying, we put it down and pick it up whenever we need it, but we're in control of it, not it being in control of us. So I think that is more about the whole education piece. So that's kind of where I ended up through my AI exploration, looking at the news in Australia and watching the documentary. I was just like, we need to empower ourselves and grow ourselves so that we can you get the good stuff out of it and not be controlled.
I really like what you said about because I wasn't sure where you were going to end up on the banning piece, but I'm right there with you. When I was working with the college, part of my job was developing policy and enforcing policy, right? Because I was over student life and on residential campus, and I can't tell you how many times faculty or staff or community members would contact me saying, "You need to create a policy so this doesn't happen." It's like, be careful what you do with policies and banning and rules, because if you can't enforce it, it doesn't make a difference.
Yeah.
And two, if you become an us versus them, it just, as we've learned from like the U.S. from prohibition and other types of situations, that it becomes, more of an interest to those who maybe didn't have as much of an interest.
Yeah.
So I totally agree. It's about education. I think about some of the recommendations that they even made in the film, but I like the idea of what I go back to that first vignette in the video about the mother trying to have some influence on the children at the table. That is our role. I think not, maybe as parents, certainly as parents, but also as adults, as people with more experience. I think we need to be aware that we have influence on people and people who are more vulnerable, whether by age or even maybe our parents or, folks who aren't as savvy. We have responsibility to help them understand and see, what the impacts are and ways to circumvent maybe behaviors that are problematic, and whether that's managing time, screen time, whether that's managing content, or managing devices for that matter. I think that there are ways that we can use education and accessibility as teaching tools versus as rules and policies. There was one of the things I came across was Facebook put out a direct response to the docudrama, and we've talked actually about a number of the things that Facebook mentioned. I think their title is what the social dilemma gets wrong. That's their response, which, I get it. I don't know why they did that. But one of the things they talk about that I think is helpful to hear is, they kind of go to the other side of the table, which is expected, that it's my responsibility. Like when I was getting the notifications as I was watching the video and taking notes, it's my responsibility to go in and shut them off. They've given me the tools to do that. What's interesting is my conversation with my wife last night and also with my brother over Thanksgiving was, do we know where these tools at? Have we researched our own interface that we're interacting with to know how to use them versus just having them turned on for us? And I think that's part of that education that you may be referring to is let's go in with our eyes wide open and know how to manage this.
Well, can I just throw something in there?
Yeah, go ahead.
Just in my mind of as well as the education, there is something about the systems themselves being right. There's another story that's been big in the news here about in Laos over in where they've been backpackers go there from across the world, and then they drink. Basically, it's a bit of a booze cruise or something. They go off and drink, but and there's been this situation where there's been methanol poisoning. So where people have been, absolutely terrible of drinking methanol, which is alcohol being made on a sort of bootleg version. So it's kind of thing. Just a bit of a comparison there with social media stuff. If lots of people are going to drink alcohol, but if you're drinking alcohol, it's kind of made within guidelines that what the percentage is, and if you can drink about this much, you'll be okay. Whereas if it's methanol, but that's pretending to be alcohol, it's potentially going to kill you. So there's something like, with the social media platforms and all of that online stuff, within the guidelines that are set, if it's doing things that are outside those guidelines that really are bad for us, then that needs to be stopped.
So in a sense, regulating for the real dangerous kinds of behaviors. Yeah.
Well, I did some of my homework while you guys were talking about this. I went to my favorite AI tool, Ed, Perplexity.
Oh yeah.
And I typed in, what are the reactions people have to the Netflix film The Social Dilemma?
Okay.
And what I like about Perplexity is it not only gives you responses, it is a summary of responses, but it also tells you where it got the information. So you can go to the source. It's almost like a citation. I'm not actually gonna share what I found, but what I am going to do is Perplexity gives you the option of actually putting the link that to the research that you did, or sharing that link. So I'm gonna put it in the show notes and let people go ahead and play with that themselves on Perplexity, because once you get there, then it has all of these really interesting follow-up questions you can explore. How has the social dilemma influenced people's behavior in social media? What are the main criticisms of the social dilemma? How do experts view the claims made in the social dilemma?
Yeah.
What impact has it had on the public opinion about big tech?
Yeah.
So there, it just kind of, it gives you this ball of information, and then you can begin to follow individual strings of it to even more information. But I'll put that in the show notes.
And I think that could be.
I was surprised how much that came up.
Yeah, I think could be really nice of, where with AI coming in, well, not coming in, it's here, it's with it growing and growing and growing, whatever the thing is, to use it as that sort of critical thinking. So to help with the critical thinking, if you see something on social media, oh, let me just ask this, that could be a real positive thing as a tool for people to, make sense of the world that they see in one sort of one side, to then go, oh, let me see if my AI can help me with this.
Yeah.
Ed, let me ask you a question, because you're much more familiar than Tom or I from behind the scenes and into the algorithm side of all of this. What role does audio play versus maybe data entry from a keyboard? Is there a difference? And part of the reason I asked that question is I've heard multiple stories of people who say, hey, I was just talking about this, or I asked Siri on my iPhone about this, and then I got different things over the next day or two that were related. And so I have no clue. Is there a connection between our devices picking up our audio versus entering data or doing searches different other ways? How does that work?
Can I add to that question just a little bit?
Yeah,
sure.
That I think, for me, what that brings up is this question, Ed: are our devices listening to us even when we're not thinking we're speaking to them?
I think I don't know for sure, but I think the ones that are, I can say Amazon, Alexa. I haven't got mine. Isn't in this room, so I can say it without it going off.
Otherwise, it'll start beating on the door. Right?
Exactly. Yeah. It'll be waking up. I think it's fairly common knowledge. They're listening. They are picking stuff up. They're I don't know where it goes, and imagine how much of that there is. How much data that relates to of it. Going into some sort of servers somewhere, and the data farms that must be picking up and recording all of that stuff for someone to do something with it. And most of it is absolutely drivel. You know, the amount of times they'll have heard me shouting at the cat, or, you know, get off the bloody table. You know, that's, and then I get table adverts or something, or cat getting off table products. So I think that definitely, though, that, you know, those are definitely listening. I think with things like phones and laptops, I don't think I can't see how physically that would be doing that. You know, where it's your Alexa, which is basically waiting for you to give it an instruction. It's almost like, well, of course it's listening, because it's waiting for you to say hello. So, you know, that's all kind of on the standby.
Well, Ed, that just made me think about this, because when you said, you know, it's kind of sitting there listening on standby. So I'm going to try something. Okay, Google.
Did it wake up?
Ooh, it's not listening to me. It did not. Okay, Google. Oh, it just flashed something that said, "Shut up, I'm sleeping."
That would be good, wouldn't it?
But, you know, I mean, I mean, when I have my phone plugged into my car, I'm driving down the road, you know, it says to me, don't try to, you know, punch in your directions while you're driving. Use the voice feature, right? And so at any point, all I have to do is just say, okay, Google, drive me to da-da-da-da, you know, or take me to.
Yeah.
Interesting. Lamar, I hope I did not subvert your question. I hope Ed still got to the answer or an answer for you on that. But
well, I think what you were asking was part of what I was interested in. But Ed, I do think our phones, my iPad, my watch, because I have an Apple Watch, are ready to respond to me if I ask them to respond. And I don't have to go in and touch a button. I just say something, it gets them activated. And there are times, particularly back when I was teaching or back when I was doing presentations quite a bit, that I had to turn my watch off because it would start answering me in the middle of my, presentation.
Yeah. So I'd say, I think anything that's on standby like that is basically listening. And the thing which then for me is another extension of that is the whole moderation of all this stuff. And I don't, there's been documentaries over here on that, the people who are behind the scenes who are moderating all of this stuff on social media, in these massive, I don't know what even you call them, workspaces, or, people just sitting there on computers going through endless hours of video that people are uploading, or, moderating Facebook and YouTube and all of that.
So in the photography world, there's a lot of discussion right now with a company that a lot of us use for working on our photographs, doing manipulation, and they've created in their program a AI generator, meaning that if I have a photograph of Tom, I can type in please put Ed behind Tom's shoulder, and it'll go pull images of you and actually put him into the photograph in a way that looks really good. However, to do that, the company is saying, well, we want to be responsible company and don't want people to do nefarious kinds of things. So all that data from my photographs that I'm working on will go and actually be reviewed by an AI program, and then, if necessary, by a person. And now I got someone looking at my private photos that I'm working on, that is actually making a decision about whether I can do what I'm doing or not. And so by interacting with even the tools that we've been given to do in photography, it's like we've opened ourselves up for our privacy and our information to be shared beyond, I think, what I'm comfortable with and what others are. So there are people there actually, in some cases, actually looking at stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. And blocking it if they don't think it's appropriate, if it's meeting certain criteria, they'll block it.
That's correct.
Well, guys, you know what? We're going to have another really long podcast here.
Oh God. Have we gone down the rabbit hole?
We've gone down a couple of rabbit holes, but it's been really interesting, and I hope folks that are listening in find it interesting as well. Well, Lamar, why don't you take us to that last thing we wanted to consider, and we'll try to do a little bit quicker wrap on this one.
Yeah. So, what do we take away from this whole conversation? The documentary that we watched. What do we take away as the most important or the most critical messages from the film, and even the responses that we've talked about? Share your thoughts on this.
Well, I'll go ahead and jump in, and then I'll pass to you or Ed. But I'm still back in this idea that there's this idea of a sense of shared responsibility. That on the one hand, social media companies and platforms really need to establish and follow, and not just on their own, but in consultation with ethicists, some ethical and moral standards for the development of social media and AI. And on the other hand, there needs to be, and I think Ed has made this point very nicely throughout, there needs to be this stronger focus on the development of social media and technological literacy by the users, and in one sense maybe by parents who have particularly young children that may not have the development themselves yet to know how to appropriately use social media and technology. And Ed, I go to your point. I think about your point you made just a few minutes ago that probably the worst thing that can happen is you ban social media for kids, because the minute you take something away once people have had it, then it almost becomes a craving to get back to it, and I'm not sure that is going to be useful for anybody. It's a longer haul, and it's maybe a tougher haul, but I think it's really about the development of social media and technological literacy. And so those are the two things that I feel are the first one comes through clear, the ethical message. The second one about literacy is not as strong as it should be, I think, in the film. But those are the two pieces I really take away as I hope people will get out of it. And by the way, we will put a link to The Social Dilemma in our show notes so people can watch it themselves, as well as to a number of these responses that we found as well. So that's my take on it.
And I've just sort of had a bit of a new thought or an evolving thought. Thinking about the sort of the nature of the social media stuff, where we are the user is the currency, so you're almost paying for your usage by watching the adverts and being advertised to. And it's all. I was just seeing: is there a sort of two-tier thing potentially on the horizon, where for people who can afford it, you might pay your subscription, or you might pay for some sort of community, or pay for an online space where you don't get advertised to, and so you pay to be with people who you want to be with, and it's less noisy, and you don't have advertising. But if you don't have the money, then you're in the space where you just get these advertisers coming at you, and you are the currency. So there could be, and there is that, there are those kind of communities already. You can, if you pay for some things, then you can get rid of the ads. So even on Netflix, if you pay for your Netflix, then you don't have so many ads. it's the same on podcasts. If you pay for a podcast, you don't get the ads. So we're sort of rolling down this, and with AI, it's probably going to be, well, if you're happy to be advertised to, then you can use our AI. But if you pay for the AI, you don't get the ads. So there's that sort of two-tier thing that's already around. And could that just create even more gaps between people, when what we really need to do is try to bring people together more? Because I think people tend to go with their tribes anyway. So we all like to be with people like us, don't we? You sort of find your place where you belong, and you all have a lovely time. But really, we need to open those up and be stretching out and finding new people, rather than just talking to all the people like us that we usually do. So that was all a bit evolutionary sort of rabbit hole stuff, but there are lots of different paths ahead.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And I think that we've talked about, I think, a lot of our takeaways. So I'm just going to do a big summary takeaway for me, and that is nothing is really free. We need to, my dad taught me that a lot of years ago. Nothing's really free. You're giving something somewhere, and it's not necessarily bad, but I think that the big message that I want to take away, and I want to encourage other people to think about, is go into all these interactions with social media with your eyes wide open, meaning that understand that you are giving something that somebody wants as being part of this. And you decide whether that's valuable enough for you to say, I'm not going to give that, or then I'm willing to give it up, and realize how that might impact your interaction on these platforms. The positive side to that is I'm willing to give up maybe a little bit of that so that the three of us can have this conversation and talk through this. I'm willing to do a little bit of that on my Facebook account so that I can connect with some of my high school friends, like I am. But I go in it with my eyes wide open, and I'm making choices, and I have to learn what the levers are that I can use to manage those choices. So that's kind of my takeaway.
Yeah. Well, this has really been an interesting conversation. At least it has been for me. And I hope it is for our listeners as well. And I just want to remind them that we'll probably have a pretty full show notes here with a lot of links in it. And so we hope that you will delve into this issue yourself. It's these are not issues that Congress can solve. They're not issues that legislatures can solve. It's not issues that people outside of ourselves can easily solve. We have to really consider what is our responsibility on this too. Well, to that end, we have to learn as much about it as we can. So I hope that you will, and then you'll take some time to do that. And Ed, it is always a pleasure to have you on.
Very much.
And I always find myself learning something new when you join us, and I hope that we can get you back again soon to be a part of this conversation. And
Thank you.
And by the way, I'm a rugby fan. I just want you to know that. So
excellent.
I really enjoy watching rugby. So I'm right there with your daughter. She's she's got it going. So that's good.
Brilliant.
That's good.
Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it. And I'm just waiting for that delivery now to tinkle its way onto my roof. I'll be.
The tracking number says it's now over Greenland, so we're getting close.
Beautiful. Lovely. I'll let you know when it's arrived.
All right. Take care, man.
All right. Good to see you, Ed. Good to see you, Lamar.
See you later.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Tom here. Thank you for listening to Getting to Third Space with Lamar and Tom. Remember to click on subscribe to get notices about new episodes, and be sure to like and share the podcast as well. Opinions and ideas expressed in this podcast are solely those of Lamar Roth and Tom Klaus, and we'd like to hear your opinions and ideas too. You can leave us a voice message on Spotify, or you can email us at the addresses found in the show notes. Also, in the show notes, you can find links to some of the things we talked about today, so you can check them out yourself. Until next time, moving forward toward third space.